During my entire childhood, my father and I used to take late-night walks due to his insomnia from shift work. Our neighborhood is considered very safe and ultimately was an urban neighborhood, besides one of the roads towards the back. This road is lined with a thick forest for about a mile and about a quarter deep, which circled back on itself. All of these walks are very dear memories of mine, except one, and it ended up being the last one. Along the road with the tree line, there was a single streetlight to illuminate a small plot of land that someone owned. However, it was very overgrown and ill-kept. It was very common for us to walk this road to enjoy the sounds of the forest, the lack of illumination, and the ease of circling back. One ordinary night, as we're walking and making conversation, my father abruptly stops and pulls me close. He puts a hand over my mouth, crouches with me, and points towards the single illuminated plot roughly 100 yards away. At first, I didn't see anything and thought he was pulling my leg. But just as I began to protest his grasp, I see a very small humanoid figure. It's roughly 3 feet in height, scrawny, and with long limbs. It materializes out of the plot's brush line and cautiously takes in its surroundings before signaling toward the brush. After a few seconds, 2 other small humanoid figures materialize as well. After a brief moment of what looked to be a discussion, all 3 make a dash for the forest tree line. Once this happened, my father picked me up, threw me over his shoulder, and made a break for our home, which was roughly a half-mile back. Mind you, my father is 6.5 feet and 220 pounds, and I was roughly 120 pounds at this time. He never showed signs of slowing due to his fear and adrenaline. After that night, we never took late-night walks. He also installed 4 bright motion detection lights around our acre plot, and he brought home a dog. The few times I've tried bringing it up, he doesn't want to discuss it and made it clear he never wanted to. Those figures still give me chills, and the image of the 3 huddled together is very vivid 15 years later. I went on a walk in the woods. It can get real creepy there sometimes, especially during winters. My mom and grandparents would always tell me that if I start to feel unsafe or like someone's watching me, I need to leave as soon as possible. They never said why, but I always figured they were afraid of the coy dogs, and it never seemed that important. I did listen to them, though. I was 18 at the time, not very tall, and I don't weigh much. I was a pretty fast runner, too. So one Monday afternoon, I left to go walking. I had been out there just 2 days before with no problems, but after walking for about half a mile, the feeling that I was being watched began. I kept walking for about half a mile until I came to the old logging road. It makes for a quick way around the woods, and it also connects to the road that my house and my grandparents' house are on. I was getting pretty tired of hiking through the snow-covered bushes and logs. I still felt like something was watching me, and just a few moments before, I could have sworn I saw something moving around in my peripheral vision. So I decided to walk down the logging road instead. As I was walking down it, I heard the sound of chains rattling nearby and started looking around, thinking maybe it was just chains on a tree blowing in the wind. I couldn't find any chains, and I stopped hearing it after a second. I kept walking and was getting close to my grandparents' land when I heard the chains again. I stopped walking to look around me and check to see if maybe it was something I was wearing. It might be my jacket or my necklace, but it wasn't anything on me. I jumped around to double check and probably looked really stupid, but I knew it wasn't me making the noise. I decided I'd just go to my grandparents' house and walk back using the actual road. As soon as I started heading into the woods, I heard something. It sounded like my footsteps had been in sync with a second pair that were maybe 10 feet behind me. It made no sense because there had been nothing there just a moment ago. I took another step and heard something step at the same time from behind me again. I didn't turn around because I was too afraid to. On hindsight, it's probably a good thing I didn't. So I acted as if I was going to take a step forward, but stopped my foot right above the snow. I wanted to make sure I wasn't going crazy. Behind me, whatever there was there stepped down. I heard the snow crunch, then it moved forward again quickly. It must have known I'd figured out it was there. I started running towards my grandparents' land, and whatever was behind me followed. It sounded humanish, and the sound of the chains started up again when it started chasing me. The thing definitely had only 2 legs, and it sounded pretty big. There are a lot of thorn bushes, small trees, and other things that stay around all year, even in the winter. While I ran around and between them as best I could, it was just going right through them. I glanced behind me for a second, and all I saw was a really tall, grey, humanoid blur before I looked back in front of me. The final stretch was the most terrifying. I could hear heavy breathing and chains rattling just a few feet behind me the entire time, and it sounded like it was almost growling. My grandparents' dog, which was a very big Malamute Mastiff, was up in the yard near the house and started barking. But he didn't run towards me, and he just stayed by the house, barking. Then he ran with me to the house when I got close to him. We ran up to the door and went inside, and slammed the door shut. I didn't hear anything and looked out the window, but there wasn't anything there. The dog was leaning on me and shaking. My grandfather came to the door from upstairs after just a few seconds, and I started crying and told him everything. He became very serious and told me to not think about it and just forget it ever happened. I tried to ask him why, but he refused to tell me anything. I tried asking my grandmother too, but she didn't say anything and changed the subject. When I was a young teen, I was sitting on the floor in my mum's bedroom playing Animal Crossing when it got dark out. I didn't have a light on because I was in there for several daylight hours, so when it got dark, I only had the hallway light. I remember looking out the window to my left because I saw some movement, but nothing was there. There was just a tree branch next to my porch, slightly shaking. I brushed it off, but then remembered we didn't have any trees in our backyard. It was about a half-mile of old farmland. I stared at the branch, trying to figure out where it was coming from, and my eyes trailed it until it came to an end against a white, oval-like surface. I was squinting to see what it was when it moved. It turned, looked at me, and then slowly lumbered off. I figured I had seen a deer with some kind of color mutation, and that my eyes just messed with me since I didn't have my glasses on. We normally had a herd or 2 of deer that grazed in the backyard. It wasn't until later I realized that none of the herds showed up during the time I saw whatever it was. None of the deer had a color mutation either, at least the regulars didn't. I ignored it for a few days, but then about a week later I was sleeping when I woke up in the middle of the night. I don't know what woke me up, but I have a large window next to my bed. I usually leave the blinds up on because my dog likes looking out. I look at my dog, and he's on alert looking out the window. I grabbed my glasses and looked at what he was fixated on and saw the thing again. I got a better look at it this time, but it had fur so black that its body wasn't really visible. I only had the light of the moon and the garage light off to the side. I figured I was dreaming or something, but my dog's head tracked it as it moved across my yard back towards the empty field. My dog was shivering slightly. Normally, he barks at the smallest things, but it seemed like he was trying to be quiet. I grabbed my sketchbook that was on the dresser next to my bed and quickly drew what I saw. I never felt scared of whatever it was, and it somehow seemed peaceful in a way. I thought it was just patrolling the area, and I happened to catch it on its nightly rounds. I grew up in Kodiak. It's an island off the coast of Alaska with a small town and a couple of smaller villages surrounding the island. You can't get there unless you take a ferry or hop on a plane. Naturally, there wasn't much to do back in high school. I'd spend my time smoking out with my buddies and walking the trails. One normal day, I thought it would be great to pick on my already paranoid friend, Alex. The native Alutiiq elders always told stories of the Agula'aq, which are very similar to skinwalkers. These beings were once humans who were cast out from the village and turned to black magic to survive. There's an unwritten rule that you can't talk about them, and very rarely would you get the opportunity to hear about someone's personal experiences. I thought to myself it would be funny to scare the crap out of my friend Alex, right? I tell him everything I know of the being while we were out strolling through the trails. The sun starts to go down, and we're all a bit creeped out. so the three of us decide to head back to the car. As Alex is taking us home, our mutual friend Bernard asks if I could buy him a pack of cigarettes. He just needed to run and grab his $10 bill from his room. So Alex and I listen to some tunes while we wait for him. He returns surprisingly quick and says, "I've only got $3, maybe tomorrow, man." "Okay, no problem," I replied. We say our goodbyes and we head toward my house so I could get dropped off. As I'm sitting down on my bed, I get a text from Bernard. It said, "Hey, where'd you guys go? I thought we were getting cigarettes." I reply, trying to see if he really forgot our conversation not even 10 minutes prior. He's adamant that he ran inside and tore his room apart looking for his money. By the time he found it, he ran outside and saw we already left. He thought we just ditched him. So I tell him I could still get him his smokes and walk over to his house to see if he's just messing with me. He stands by his story to this day, and I believe him. I was at this park with my ex-girlfriend a few years back. It has a neighborhood on one side and a few miles of pretty dense forest on the other. We were stargazing, and as we sat in this opening near the neighborhood, I heard a rustling in a patch of shrubbery that sounded like a person stomping around. I immediately got up to investigate, as this area is known for sketchy activities. What I saw made no sense. I still feel like I imagined it or something. I saw what looked like a person hunched over with a white cloth over them. They walk out of the bushes and stand on this path that goes around the entire park. I turned to my girlfriend and asked her what it looked like without telling her what it looked like to me, and she described it exactly as I did. So we hightailed it out of there. We booked it to my car and got in, and I, wanting to know what the hell it was, turned on the high beams in the hopes it would follow us. It did not. Now this is where the story gets even stranger. We went to another park because we wanted to continue stargazing. We drove a few miles to this other park that is essentially a giant field. We found a bench and sat down and managed to forget about that weird encounter. After about 10 to 15 minutes of this, we suddenly saw, not heard, mind you, what appeared to be a black helicopter. It flew over us in the direction of that first park. This thing was completely silent. There was no noise at all. I have not been able to find any pictures online that come close to what it looked like, but if you're familiar with Halo Reach, it looked like a falcon. This thing maneuvered like nothing I have ever seen. Granted, I don't know much about aviation, but it dipped over a tree line at an angle so steep that we thought it was going to crash. The weirdest part of all of this is that there was someone else at this second park, an old woman walking her dog, who didn't react to that plane/helicopter at all. It was by far the strangest night of my life. I have yet to return to either park, and I don't really ever plan on doing so. There's some really strange stuff out there. Please drop a like and subscribe to Eerie Echoes for more horror stories. As always, thank you for watching.